Welcome to Hypnotic Advertising. I'm Dan O'Day, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if you're wondering if hypnotic advertising is just a catchy title or if there really are techniques used by hypnotherapists that you can use to create more effective ads and commercials. The good news for you is that I'm not particularly good at coming up with catchy titles, so you can interpret this seminar's title quite literally. You really are going to learn some exciting, powerful, easy-to-use techniques to exert much greater influence over the recipients of your advertising messages. My educational background is psychology, in which I earned my university degree. My postgraduate work was in hypnosis. You know how when you were a kid and you thought certain things would be really fascinating to pursue when you grew up, but then you grew up and discovered many things aren't quite as exciting as you had imagined? You found out that being a lawyer isn't exactly like being Perry Mason, and being a doctor requires an awful lot of studying and lots of very long hours and stress. Well, hypnosis is the only thing in my life that turned out to be more fascinating than I had imagined. And believe me, I could talk hypnotic theory with you for hours and hours, but I suspect you might become very, very bored. A number of years ago, I realized that many of the things a hypnotherapist uses to induce trance can be used as effective advertising tools. Some people use some of these tools without even realizing it. Others never use them simply because they don't know those tools exist. I've been applying these techniques ever since I became aware of them in broadcast commercials, in print advertising, and in direct mail to tremendous effect. Because this is an audio seminar, I'll illustrate the various techniques with lots of radio commercials, but please bear in mind that you can use these techniques in any advertising medium. In this seminar, I will combine traditional hypnotic techniques with some techniques that have been codified in a field of study called neuro-linguistic programming, or for short, NLP. You might have heard of NLP. You might even have seen it touted as some mysterious, powerful mind-controlling device. It's not. NLP is simply an analysis of how human beings process information and affect change in experience and in behavior, whether within themselves or within others. NLP is a bunch of tools that can be used to build more effective bridges of communication. As it happens, I was one of the first people to have been certified as an NLP practitioner back in the early 1980s, and I was the first person in radio or television to become so certified by one of NLP's co-founders. I say this not to impress you, but rather to reassure you that I'm not some latecomer to the subject, nor am I someone who happened to read a book about it and now is presuming to teach it to you. NLP was created by studying the works of several world-class communicators, including an anthropologist, a family therapist, and a psychiatrist named Milton Erickson. Erickson was an intuitive master of the hypnotic experience. His work had a profound influence on NLP. Having first learned what I would call traditional hypnotic theory in my university days, I found Erickson's approach to be exciting, challenging, and incredibly powerful. In this seminar, I will combine traditional hypnotic theory, Ericksonian hypnosis, NLP, and my own lifelong broadcasting career to present a perspective that is unique and, I hope, valuable to you. Before we go any further, let me offer this small piece of advice. Don't be afraid. When I have presented this seminar for live audiences, I've noticed that at first some attendees seem intimidated. They think, I'm not sure if I understand all these terms and these big words. And also, I don't think I could learn to use such sophisticated techniques. But then, about halfway through the seminar, I see them relax. I see their eyes light up, and I can almost hear them saying to themselves, now I get it. You and I are going on a journey. I will be your guide, and I will not allow you to become hopelessly lost. There's nothing to be afraid of. I will use a few scientific terms, but not many. My worst subject in school was science. If I can understand this, you can too. I will use a couple of fancy terms like Hebbian connections. It doesn't matter to me if you remember the terms. Hebbian connections is a label that is applied to a specific principle. If you can understand and learn how to use and remember the principle, I don't care if you remember the term that represents it. But sometimes we do apply labels to concepts simply to help us remember. So I will use a little bit of scientific language, but just a little. If you embark on this journey with me with a little faith, I promise it will be worth it. If you listen attentively, by the end of this seminar, you will know how to apply these techniques. Also, I have selected well over 100 audio examples to illustrate specific principles and techniques I'll be sharing with you. I expect this seminar to be heard by many different people representing all market sizes and many different countries and cultures. Gathering these examples has required a lot of work and a lot of thought. For most listeners, none of the examples will be objectionable. But depending upon your own sense of propriety, you might hear one or two commercials that you would never air, that you would find to be too rude. I have made a conscious effort not to censor myself in presenting these examples to you. Actually, there is one station promo that I decided not to include in this package because I felt that listeners who are particularly religious or particularly conservative might be offended, even though the spot in question has nothing to do with religion, and even though I am not offended by it. But aside from that one spot, I'm trusting that if you hear an example that does not represent your personal tastes, you will understand that I am trying to teach these principles by using as many different effective examples as I can. You will hear one commercial that includes a dam, and that's as close as we'll get to using bad language, and you'll hear a commercial for a type of business that I don't happen to frequent and that some people might be offended by, while many others won't be bothered by it at all. And then there's the sex education spot from Wales where, well, you'll hear it. Most people find it to be very effective, but I have to admit that when I find myself conducting seminars for religious broadcasters, I tend not to play that particular spot, again, even though it has nothing to do with religion. So if I do play a commercial that does not represent your own personal standards, I invite you to ignore it. In fact, one of the spots I'll play has a very strong religious message. And if that spot represents your point of view and you enjoy it immensely, I'm sure at the same time you will recognize that there are other people listening to this seminar who don't share your religious viewpoint and who don't appreciate the message as you do. But I'm including it because it so effectively illustrates a specific advertising principle. In this seminar, we're going to talk about the brain, hypnosis, communication, and memory. People remember associations, not facts. Don't try to sell in a commercial with facts because no one remembers facts. They don't remember how many billions of dollars the bank has on deposit. They don't remember how many models you have on the lot for them to choose from or what % financing or rebate you offer. Sell with associations. Everyone raised in North America can finish this sentence. In 1492, Columbus did what? Right, sailed the ocean blue. Now, if you were able to finish that sentence, I have a question for you. Have you been rehearsing that little rhyme? When you began to listen to this seminar, did you rehearse that rhyme just in case you'd be asked to complete it? No, the odds are you haven't even thought of that rhyme for decades. You might not have thought of it since you were 10 years old, but the association sticks. Sell the association, not the fact. Winston tastes good like... And if you were raised in North America, you probably finished that sentence with, a cigarette should. Now, it's not just that each of those two sentences rhymed. The rhyme helped. But you could remember those lines because of the associations they created. They could have said, Winston tastes good because of our premium tobacco. They could have put that in a jingle, you would have heard it 10,000 times, and you would have repeated, because of our premium tobacco right now. The rhyme certainly helped strengthen the association, but rhyming something doesn't automatically mean the audience will remember it. People learn and remember through associations. Don't sell with facts. Sell via associations. Let's listen to some examples of commercials that use associations to sell, as well as a couple that misuse associations and thereby weaken the effectiveness of their messages.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Is that a VW you're driving?
Well, actually, it's an RPS.
Oh, yeah, an RPS. At first, I thought it was an MG.
Nope, RPS.
My wife thought it was an AMC. But I'll tell her it's an
RPS.
RPS, right. My little boy thought it was a BMW.
Your little boy?
He's only 6 weeks old. What does he know?
When he grows up, tell him it was an RPS.
Right. Where'd you buy it?
I built it myself, a piece at a time from my RPS auto parts store. They've got the parts, they've got the pros, and they've got the prices. That makes it an RPS.
Right. My dog thought it was a GMC.
Although you probably never heard of that advertiser before, now you've learned to associate RPS with automobiles. Here's another commercial that builds an association.
Good evening and welcome to Le Ciel Rouge. I'll be your waiter this evening. My name is Jean-Paul.
His real name is John, and he's from Minneapolis.
Please allow me to begin with this evening's specials. Tonight, Chef Jean-Pierre has prepared a magnificent beefsteak smothered in a zesty tomato confit. Very nice. It's then accompanied by a tantalizing pomme frite.
That's just a $40 cheeseburger and fries.
I, Jean-Paul, will give you a moment to decide and will return with sparkling water for la table.
He'll be back in a half an hour with tap water. Around here, things aren't always what you'd expect. Like the Mercedes-Benz E-Class. It starts at under $48,000. See your authorized Mercedes-Benz retailer for details.
MSRP for E-Class starting at $47,745, includes $645 transportation charge, excludes all taxes, title, license, and options. Retailer price may vary.
Test drive the affordable Mercedes-Benz of your dreams at your Mercedes-Benz Center, or see them on the World Wide Web at mbsocal.com.
Now, that commercial did build an association, but what did you picture during that commercial? Probably a pretentious waiter in an overpriced restaurant. So what do you now associate with Mercedes? Probably pretentiousness. That might not be what they were trying to communicate, but they succeeded in associating Mercedes with overpriced pretentiousness. That's not the smartest way to use the power of association. Here's another commercial.
When you live just outside of town, life is so much simpler and the entertainment is free. Call Melanie Walker to see suburban properties and weekend getaways. 882-6123. Selling seclusion. Melanie Walker, ERA Rutherford Realtors. Once you're settled in, all that's left to do is buy a bug zapper and enjoy.
Now, the people who made that commercial thought they were being clever, and they were given an award by their local advertising association. But they have succeeded in associating that particular realtor with insect-infested properties, which might not be the smartest way to sell real estate. This next commercial, by the Richards Group, utilizes the power of association in a manner that is indirect, but nonetheless effective.
No. 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 No.
No. No. No.
Johnny, Lego my hair. No. Johnny, Lego my hair. No. Johnny, Lego my hair.
No. Hi, Susie. Will you go out with me?
No.
Hi, Susie. Will you go out with me?
No.
Yeah, can I substitute fries for coleslaw?
No.
Can I substitute beans for coleslaw?
No.
Can I substitute rice for coleslaw?
No.
Hello, sir. Can I have a raise?
No.
Hello, sir. Can I have a raise?
No.
Sir, I beseech you. Can I have a raise?
No.
Seeing as how the average person hears over 200 no's every day, wouldn't it be nice to hear a yes now and then? We think so, which is why at Union Planters, our employees do everything in their power to find a way to say yes.
Is this car loan doable, Joan?
Yes.
Can you say that again, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Union Planters, the best answer in banking. Equal opportunity lender, member FDIC.
In that spot, in a world where it seems that all you ever hear is no, they associate Union Planters Bank with yes. Let's see what association this next commercial creates to the advertiser.
Oh, honey, I just love this Water Street Grill. And these fajitas, they're so darn good.
Oh, yeah, good.
The chicken, the prawns, and yeah, get those Texas baked beans.
Oh, yeah,
And the cheese, the salsa. I got a bit of gas here.
I'm on fire!
Oh, and quite spicy, too.
Come to the Water Street Grill for Cam's fabulous fajitas. And every Tuesday is Fajita Tuesday, 2 for just $12.99. Fajitas now at the Water Street Grill.
The Water Street Grill!
How likely are you to patronize a restaurant that you associate with digestive gas eruptions? Is that what you look for in a restaurant? By the way, fajitas don't even cause gas, but that's not the point here. The point is that you want to build an association between the advertiser and the consumer in a way that makes the consumer want to patronize the advertiser. Here's one last example of a commercial by Dick Terhune that builds an association.
Are we there yet?
No, does it look like we're
Where are we
there?
going?
I don't know.
I'm hungry.
I'm thirsty.
I want something
Guys.
to eat.
I want a drink.
Daddy, can we
Guys.
stop and get something to eat?
Guys, could you play something quiet for a
What
while?
can we play?
Are we there yet?
Does it look like we're there?
No.
Well, then why
Guys.
are you asking me?
Because you're ugly.
You're ugly.
Guys.
You're ugly.
Stop looking at me.
I'm not
Guys.
looking at
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
Guys.
Yes, you are.
No,
Guys,
I'm not.
let's
Yes,
play a
you
game.
are.
Let's play a game. Count the cars.
Count all of them?
What do we count?
Which one?
Count
That's boring.
count
I want to play.
count the cars that start with A.
Audi, there's one.
Look, Daddy, it says it's from Danbury Audi. There's another Danbury Audi.
I got one over here.
How come we don't drive a Danbury Audi?
Daddy, do all Audis come from Danbury?
Yes. Where do Danbury Audis come from? Danbury Audi, a mile west of I-84, exit 8 at 52 Newtown Road, and at danburyaudi.com. Are you there yet? In that commercial, the association is simple. If you live in or near Danbury, when you think Audi, think Danbury Audi. Let's talk about the brain. Neurologically speaking, as far as your brain is concerned, there is no difference between your memory of something you've seen before and your memory of something you've never actually seen. I know that sounds strange. Let me explain with an illustration from your own life. Is there some incident from your early childhood that one of your older relatives just loves to dig up whenever they see you? The time when you were 4 years old and you ran down the street naked, or the time you went blueberry picking and ate so many berries that you threw up in the back seat of the car. Can you think of an example of what I'm talking about, a favorite family story of something you did as a young child? If so, I'll bet I can predict a couple of things that happen whenever this aunt or uncle or parent tells this story. Number one, when they tell that story for the 10,000th time, you see it in your mind's eye. And number two, the odds are you've heard that story so many times that you're not sure if you actually remember it happening to you, or if you're just remembering the pictures that were planted in your mind each time some aunt or uncle told the story. As far as your brain is concerned, it doesn't matter. If you picture human memory as a filing cabinet, your brain drops the picture your eyes made when they witnessed a real event into a folder. And it drops a picture that was created only in your mind's eye into a similar folder. Neurologically speaking, it's the same process. And sometimes we find out after 20 or 30 years of hearing that story that it wasn't us in the story after all. It was our older brother. And we say, no, that can't be. I remember it. I can see it. But we're told, no, that's when we lived in the old apartment on Washington Street. We drove the Buick. You weren't even born yet. But you have that indelible picture in your mind's eye. Those pictures are mentally stored in your memory bank, regardless of whether you ever saw them in real life or just through other people's stories. In fact, I can think of an example from my own life. I live in Los Angeles, but I'm originally from Connecticut, where much of my family still lives. Once, during a New Year's gathering at my mother's house in Connecticut, many members of my extended family were gathered in the living room arguing about some topic of interest. Well, we weren't arguing, we were just discussing it heatedly. Several months later, my mother visited me in California, and once again that topic of discussion came up, referring to the earlier group discussion that had occurred in my mother's living room. I said, "Remember when Sam talked about the lawsuits and how he had read that guy had never lost a single court case?" Sam is my uncle. And my mother replied, "Sam wasn't even there when we talked about this." And I said, "Of course he was. In fact, I still remember where he was sitting, on the far end of the sofa." "No, Dan, Sam was in Florida. He retired to Florida a few years ago, and he spends every winter there. He's never in Connecticut during the winter, and he wasn't in my living room for New Year's." But I thought,
I know he was. I could picture Sam sitting there that night on the far end of the sofa. And as I thought, I realized that some other family member who was sitting in the middle of the sofa had told the group about what Sam had told her about those lawsuits. And as she told us, she gestured to her right, which from my perspective was the left side of the sofa. And as she did so, in my mind's eye, I pictured Sam sitting there. And in my memory, I pictured Sam sitting there telling us that story. That is the power of a constructed image. You see, there are two types of mental images: eidetic images and constructed images. An eidetic image is something that you have seen. A constructed image is an image that you created in your mind's eye, and we will talk about ways to use each of these. But if you can build a powerful visual image in your target audience's mind that is related to what you are selling, then you can hang up your shingle and declare yourself to be an advertising genius. Whether a visual memory is eidetic or constructed can have very serious consequences. Take, for example, what is known as recovered memory phenomenon. This is when adults later in life remember that as children they were abused by an adult. And people tend to fall into two camps regarding this issue. Either they say, well, that must be true, no one would make up such a thing. Or they say, this is just ridiculous, it's a bunch of psychobabble, and it's all being created by unscrupulous therapists. In fact, there are such things as recovered memories, but how you recover them can be very dangerous. With a hypnotherapist, it's very easy to plant a suggestion in the patient's mind. And you don't have to come right out and say, do you remember the time your uncle took you behind the barn? You could just say, do you remember anything unusual and maybe a little upsetting that happened with your uncle when you were little? And part of the hypnotic relationship is that the subject wants to please the hypnotherapist and therefore searches for ways to fill in those blanks. This is a very controversial issue in psychology and in criminology, and that's because it is so tough at times to distinguish between what is real and what is not. But once a vivid image has been created, whether it's an eidetic image or a constructed image, its power is very real. Memories and associations are intricate networks of neurons. The advertising slogan, "Winston tastes good like a cigarette should," involves millions of neurons. The neurons used are not exclusive to one memory, because our memories are not stored in the brain cells, but rather as a pattern of electrical signals firing between the cells, in the synapses, the spaces between the cells. Associations and memories form what are called Hebbian connections. Hebbian connections are neurochemical changes in cells involved in one memory that make it easier for those cells to communicate to each other than to other cells not involved in the memory. A memory is a network. You have thousands of memories, which means you have thousands of networks of brain cells, and many cells are involved in many different memories. But any specific memory is one specific network of cells. For example, the network of connections involved in the memory of riding a bicycle. Once you recapture the concept of riding a bike, you recall all of the individual actions that go into riding a bike. You don't have to go to one part of the brain to remember how to position yourself on the seat and then go to another part of the brain to remember about balance. Once you recall that connection, you recall all the other connections in that network. That's why you can hear a song you haven't heard in 30 years and still be able to sing the lyrics. The first words of the song trigger the next words, as that particular network of Hebbian connections is triggered. Once I illustrated the concept of Hebbian connections during a live version of this seminar. What you are about to hear was not rehearsed in any way. I had no idea of knowing if it would even work.
Okay, let me give you a much more mundane example. Is anyone here a big Paul Simon fan, by any chance? Yeah? Okay, his album, Still Crazy After All These Years, remember that album? Okay. What's the second song on side one? No? No? Okay. First, no, it's not Kodachrome. That's the wrong album, wrong decade. Okay, can't do it. The first song on side one is Still Crazy After All These Years. Now, If you happen to know that album, think of the last strains of Still Crazy After All These Years and see if you come up with a guess as it fades out. Bingo. My Little Town. That's a connection. I could have offered $100 to the first person who could tell me track 2, side 1 of an album from 1977, and no one would have won it. But I tell you, think of the last strains of the first song, you got it. Okay, that's heavy in connection.
I don't care if you remember the term heavy in connections, but when you are advertising or promoting something, I do want you to remember to build chains of relationships where once you get the ball rolling, it doesn't stop until the message is delivered. Here's an illustration of the power of synaptic connections. Once I was interviewed by an advertising publication, and I was asked, what is the best radio commercial I ever heard? I thought a moment, and then I replied that the best radio commercial I ever heard wasn't a radio commercial at all. To this day, I don't keep business receipts unless I need it for the warranty. When my office manager says, should we ask them for a receipt, I always turn to her and say, a canceled check is my receipt. And that is because when I was a child growing up in West Hartford, Connecticut, and I would call the number for the correct time was sponsored by the local bank. Before they gave you the time over the phone, they would say, First National Bank reminds you, a canceled check is your receipt. The correct time is... Well, that's been a lot of years. And although it was on the telephone instead of the radio, it was a simple, clear message that I understood. And it really has had an impact. I don't save those stupid receipts. I just pull out my canceled checks. That phone recording connected canceled check and receipt for me. And it did it over and over. That was one of the big lessons in advertising for me. These days, of course, banks don't want to have to provide you with a canceled check, so maybe that particular synaptic connection has outlived its usefulness. But it's remained intact ever since I was a small boy. The wider the base of neurological contact, the more parts of the brain it involves, the stronger the impression. And the more senses you can involve, the wider the base of neurological contact. For example, I can drive from point A to point B 100 times with someone sitting next to me and telling me where to turn each time, and after 100 times I still won't know how to get there. But if I drive there once consulting a map with no one helping me, I'll probably know how to get there the second time. That's because I'm using more of my senses. If I'm driving and someone is telling me, all I'm using is auditory. I'm listening to his directions. But if I use a map, it's visual, because I have to look at the map. And then I have to look for the landmarks or street signs indicated on the map. And for me, it's also auditory, because I'm talking to myself. Okay, turn left on 5th Street, look for the highway entrance. And it's kinesthetic because I'm holding the map or I'm juggling the map. I'm using several senses at once, and my memory becomes that much stronger. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you this, but this often happens to me in movie theaters. If I go to a movie and get up in the middle to get some popcorn or to use the bathroom, the movie theater, of course, is dark, and I want to be able to find my row when I return. So I always carefully count the rows from my row to the back row, and then, once I've gotten the popcorn and returned, I can't remember how many rows I counted because I didn't bother to tell myself. The only sense I used was kinesthetic, the act of counting the rows with my pointed finger as I walked up the aisle, and maybe a tiny bit of auditory as I mentally counted the rows. If, when I got to the back of the theater, I had said to myself, 15 rows, got it? 15. And maybe I'd say to myself, 5, 10, 15. If I did that, I would remember my row number when I returned. The more senses you involve, the wider the range of connections. So if you hear anything during this seminar that makes sense to you, if you really want to remember it, I encourage you to make some notes. And then read over those notes, because you'll combine the auditory experience of hearing this seminar with the kinesthetic experience of making notes with the visual experience of reading those notes. I never lose my car keys because I always keep them in the left pocket of my trousers, but it seems that lost car keys is a common problem for some people. If you're one of those people, here's how to make it so you never again can't find your keys. Instead of coming into your house and throwing them on the counter or dropping them on your dresser, take just a moment to internalize the action you just took. For example, I put my car keys on the counter in the kitchen so I could grab them easily before leaving for my tennis match. We'll be talking a lot about sense modalities, and that sentence was very kinesthetic. That is, it revolves around actions. I put the keys, grab them easily, leaving for my tennis match. You're making an association that you will easily remember when you need your keys, if you take just that very tiny moment to make the associations. Here's a spot by James Stodd that involves more than one of the primary senses, thereby strengthening the impact of that message.
Close your eyes and visualize. Imagine a £1 coin. Cool, hard, sitting in the palm of your hand. Now imagine another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another. In fact, imagine 17,000 coins in a room. That's our stash of cash. We want to give it to you.
That spot was both visual and auditory, as you both saw and heard 17,000 £1 coins falling. The falling was a kinesthetic image, and it all led to the kinesthetic excitement of winning. People process information via the 5 senses: sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. And of the 5 senses, the first 3 are used the most often: sight, that's visual, sound, auditory, and touch, also known as kinesthetic or tactile. In advertising, it's smart to select the sense that people are going to use to identify with a product. For example, what do you picture when I say the word mustard? Almost everyone pictures yellow. So if you're selling mustard, don't try to get people to picture the mustard seeds. Try to get them to picture the yellow mustard. Here's a commercial by McConaughey, Stein, Schmidt, Brown for mustard.
Birds tweet, bees buzz, a loon calls. As you pick up your ham sandwich, you think, what a wonderful day for the company picnic. Then your boss sits down, bratwurst in hand. Stewardie asks, what's your opinion of the company these days? Your reply is direct. A concerned look crosses your boss's face. Stewardie says, I believe that squeezed barrel of Plockman's mustard is almost empty. Pass it over. Reluctantly, you do so. You're sure your boss will squeeze the remaining Plockmans onto his brat. He does, squeezing in rhythm with nature. The bird, your boss. The bees, your boss. The loon, your boss. As the last of the Plockmans falls on his bratwurst, you think, what a terrible day for the company picnic. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't run out of Plockmans.
Did you see the yellow mustard? That's a multi-sensory commercial. Remember, the more of the senses you can involve while delivering the sales message, the stronger the memory. Here we have birds tweeting, that's auditory. Other auditory images include bees buzzing and the squirting sound of the mustard. Visually, we could see the birds tweeting and the bees buzzing, and we saw in full color as the yellow mustard squirted out. On the other hand, here's a commercial that didn't give as much thought to the visual images it created.
Everyone's nightmare. You're at a job interview. The boss asks his first question.
Can you make coffee?
The more you know about this bogus job,
Huge opportunity.
the worse it looks. Here's one time when the more you know about something, the better it
You have
looks.
to kiss up to me on a daily basis.
The Chevy Cavalier. It looks good.
Empty trash.
And Cavalier has standard ABS and battery rundown protection.
Shine my shoes.
Cavalier.
My wife's
The more
shoes
you know,
too,
the better it
every
looks.
day.
Genuine Chevrolet.
Oh, yes. And could you work for free?
Now, what did you picture? The interview situation? The boss? You or someone else applying for a job? Okay. And did you picture a Chevrolet Cavalier? Well, guess what they were supposed to be selling? Not job interviews. They're supposed to be selling cars. The picture you paint is the picture the listener will remember. And the picture the listener remembers is the impact your commercial makes on that listener. Here's a commercial by Dick Orkin that is highly visual.
Junior, you in your bedroom? Hello, son, I'd like to have a little talk with you. Could you turn the radio off? Thank you. What I want to talk to you about, son, is or another way of putting it is, which I admit is my way of looking at it, but could you look at me when I'm talking to you? Don't look at me like that. Son, your mother and I feel that we should talk to, and that's why I had the talk. Well, fine, I can see you're busy, so why don't you turn the radio back on? Doris, I talked to him. Everything's fine.
If this conversation between parent and teenager sounds familiar, it's time you read our free booklet, How to Talk to Your Teenager. Write TALK, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84150. That's TALK, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84150. Free from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons.
What did you picture? Did you picture the boy's room? Did you picture the boy? If so, I trust you realize there was no boy represented there. All we heard was the voice of the father. Did you picture his room? If so, did you picture rock posters on his wall? And if you pictured rock posters on his wall, think just for a moment how amazing that is, because the music in the background was not rock music. It sounds like something from 1955. Frankly, that commercial would have been even better if the Mormon Church had allowed them to use the kind of music today's teenager is likely to listen to. But even though the music was completely wrong, the character and the situation were so recognizable that they helped you paint a picture of a contemporary teenager. And I guarantee that if you saw a rock poster on the son's wall, it wasn't the Everly Brothers or Johnny and the Hurricanes. You don't have to try to remember what that commercial was about. All you need is for me to say, remember that spot where the father knocks on the son's door? And when I say that, the movie in your head begins, and you experience the commercial message all over again. Audio image generators. What is an audio image generator? It's any sound that occurs during your commercial. A sound effect, voice, or piece of music. If you include a sound in a commercial, that sound triggers a picture. Whether you want it to or not, whether you thought about it or not, it triggers a picture. And you had better be sure that it triggers the picture you want the targeted audience to see, because that is what they are seeing now. In this commercial, notice how instead of supporting the sales message, the sound effects actively compete with it for the listener's attention.
This is not a commercial. This is a 60-second radio coupon brought to you by the Chicken Box at 3726 North Tryon Street at the corner of Craighead and North Tryon. Please click this coupon from your radio immediately and redeem it at the Chicken Box for their delicious seafood special. Yes, not only does the Chicken Box have mouth-watering chicken and burgers, but fresh seafood like flounder, trout, perch, croaker, plus jumbo and popcorn shrimp. Your radio coupon entitles you to the delicious seafood meal at a very special price. For only $5.95, you get the seafood special, including fresh fish, succulent shrimp, outstanding oysters, and delicious deviled crab. You get it all for only $5.95 when you use your radio coupon. And here's how. Just tell the folks at the Chicken Box you heard about their seafood special on Power 98 WPEG, and you'll get it all for only $5.95. Stop by the Chicken Box today at 3726 North Tryon Street at the corner of Craighead and North Tryon, or phone ahead for fast pickup. Call 332-2636. The Chicken Box. You can't get it fresher at home.
What did you picture during that commercial? Chickens? A scissors cutting out the coupon? A cash register ringing? The telephone ringing? Did you picture yourself either ordering dinner from the Chicken Box or eating dinner from the Chicken Box? Probably not. But that's what they were supposed to sell. You want to make the audience picture what you are trying to sell them. If they picture anything else, you're not selling. Whoever produced that commercial tried to find the right sound effects, but they thought that right means finding an effect that literally represents every word in the script. Right means finding the sound effect that paints the picture that sells what you are advertising. Remember, the sound effect you use in a radio commercial determines the mental pictures your listeners will make. Here are some examples of commercials that use audio effectively to create visual images that sell what's being advertised, starting with this spot created by Dave Green.
chances are you'll never have the opportunity to drive one of these. On the other hand, you can get behind the wheel and experience one of these. But only at Ferrari of Central Florida. Get in. Hold on to something. We're going for a ride. Ferrari of Central Florida, the area's only authorized Ferrari dealer. 525 Lake Destiny Drive, parallel to I-4 between Maitland and Winter Park. Call Ferrari of Central Florida at 407-667-4300.
In that commercial, the audio leads to visual images and, even more strongly, to a kinesthetic experience, the experience of driving a high-performance vehicle at high speed. Use of sound also can color the pictures and affect the emotional response elicited by the commercial. Take, for example, this commercial, produced by Andre Bergeron.
There's a sound that strikes fear in the hearts of many. It can signal the beginning of another in a series of crises that have become commonplace. It's an alarm that sounds with news of trouble, injury, or death. If someone you love is addicted to alcohol or drugs, this can be the most terrifying sound in the world. New Beginnings at Waverly understands your fear and can ease your pain. They can help your family on the road to recovery. All it takes to get started is a phone call. For the addict, this can be a frightening sound. People addicted to alcohol or drugs are afraid. Afraid of discovery. Afraid to admit they have a problem. New Beginnings understands your fear as well.
New Beginnings.
Call New Beginnings at Waverly. 1-800-642-7495. That's 1-800-642-7495. Give your family a new beginning.
That commercial is more sophisticated than it might appear on the surface because it ties two modalities together. By modality, I simply mean the form of communication, auditory, visual, or kinesthetic. They tie the auditory, the sound of a ringing telephone, to the kinesthetic, the emotional response to that ringing sound. They tie the ringing telephone to the dropping sensation in the pit of your stomach when the phone rings in the middle of the night and you fear something has happened to someone you love. Here's a commercial that really isn't very good, except that it establishes a strong audio signature.
You look like you've had a hard day, honey.
Oh, I'm beat. I could go to sleep right now. Oh, where am I? Why, this is incredible. Look at that view! And those mountains, why, it's beautiful! I feel so alive.
Look at all the fun and relaxation they have here.
Look at that swimming pool with a hot pool next to it. And that restaurant, I've never tasted food so delicious. Why, I must be at...
John, wake up. You've been dreaming.
Oh, and what a dream. I dreamt I was at Sun Mountain Lodge.
I think you've been working too hard, John.
Maybe you're right.
For reservations, call 996-2211. Located near Winthrop, Washington, the gateway of the North Cascades, Sun Mountain Lodge.
In my How to Create Radio Commercials That Sell seminar, I stress the importance of a strong core message, which, unfortunately, this spot lacked. But that homemade audio tag, where they sing Sun Mountain Lodge, even though it's very corny, becomes an instant identifier. If they had tied that audio signature to a strong core message, they would have had a powerful commercial. In the United States, traditionally, there have been three major television networks: NBC, CBS, and ABC. What is NBC television signature? Right, the NBC chimes. That's an audio signature. What is the signature for CBS television? It probably took you a moment longer before you answered the CBSI. That's a visual signature. What's ABC TV's signature? They don't have one. And frankly, the network has no identity. And which network is the weakest brand of the three? ABC. The strongest network signature is NBC's. When I ask, what is the symbol for NBC, almost everyone immediately replies, the chimes. When I ask, what is the symbol for CBS, there's usually a pause, and then the person says, oh, the I. Why are the NBC chimes the strongest signature? Not because the signature is auditory, but because it's intrusive. You can sit in front of the TV set and close your eyes, and those chimes still reach your brain. A successful signature has to be effortlessly memorable. Kinesthetic images consist of movement or feelings. Tactile, touching, holding, or feeling, whether feeling physically or feeling emotionally. If I were to say to you, imagine that right behind me is a chalkboard, and I were to take my fingernails and drag them across that chalkboard. Guess what kind of image that is? Kinesthetic. Even as I described myself dragging my fingernails across that imaginary chalkboard, you might have found yourself inwardly groaning or clenching your jaw or contracting your stomach muscles. That's a kinesthetic response. Even though if I really did it, it would be an auditory experience. It would make a distinctive sound. And it's the memory of that sound that causes that kinesthetic response. In fact, it's doubly kinesthetic, because not only do you have that physical reaction, you also have the movement of the fingers across the chalkboard. Just the phrase, like nails on a chalkboard, is such a strong image. It's completely kinesthetic on more than one level. When they decided to market Kentucky Fried Chicken, how did they describe it? Tasty? Delicious? No, because eating fried chicken isn't a gustatory experience. It's a kinesthetic experience. It's not a matter of flavor and taste. It's a matter of how it feels when you eat it. It's greasy and messy. And Kentucky Fried Chicken was marketed with the very accurate slogan, it's finger-licking good. They didn't talk about the secret spices or the fresh ingredients. They talked about the kinesthetic experience. Eating corn on the cob is a kinesthetic experience. It's hot. The butter is melting all over. The pieces get caught in your teeth. That's a kinesthetic experience. In the 1960s, Hertz Rent-A-Car's advertising campaign said, Hertz puts you in the driver's seat. And their TV commercials featured a business person flying through the air and landing in a moving car and driving away. Flying through the air and landing in a car is a kinesthetic experience. And driving a car is what kind of experience? It's kinesthetic. Your hands on the wheel, your rear end in the seat, the vibration of the car, the feeling of the speed, that's kinesthetic. If you eat too much and have an upset stomach, is that experience primarily visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? It's kinesthetic. It's the feeling you get after you've overeaten. And the classic Alka-Seltzer commercial from the 1960s said, I can't believe I ate the whole thing. You could practically feel his gaseous discomfort. And that was followed by, plop, plop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is. That begins auditorily, as you hear the tablets drop into the water, but it very quickly becomes kinesthetic. When you drop the tablets into a glass, it splashes. That's kinesthetic. And the fizzing is kinesthetic. And the relief it brings is kinesthetic. There's a hamburger chain in the southwestern United States called Carl's Jr. They sell to their core target demo of 17 to 24-year-old males. And they have identified what it is that 17 to 24-year-old males want from a hamburger, and that is what they sell.
Okay, so you shell out $7.50 to see the latest action-adventure flick, and then they want the rest of your paycheck for some stale popcorn. This is the How to Eat Meat Man from Carl's Jr. telling you not to say, hasta la vista, baby, to the movies. Just smuggle a big, juicy Carl's Jr. superstar right into the multiplex. First, get a nice roomy backpack, plastic lined. Then, wait for the lights to go down, take out that big, meaty burger, and chow. Now, you're going to drip sauce on the chairs, the floor, and your date. But that's the good part about eating a juicy Carl's Jr. superstar at the movies. It's dark. And if the manager does show up and tell you to leave, look him right in the eye and say, go ahead, make my day. This has been the How to Eat Meat Man from Carl's Jr. telling you that if it doesn't get all over the place, it doesn't belong in your face.
How tasty are their hamburgers? They don't say. But are they juicy and messy? Do they drip all over the place? Yes. And this is a kinesthetic commercial. Note all the kinesthetic images they created. Smuggle, roomy backpack, drip sauce on the chair, on the floor, on your date. By the way, a lot of people hate those commercials. You see letters to the editor of the local newspaper complaining about these disgusting, offensive commercials. And all of those letters are written by middle-aged women, which is not their targeted audience. Here's one more commercial from that campaign. See how many kinesthetic terms you can spot.
Hey, it's the How to Eat Meat Man from Carl's Jr. telling you how to eat meat at your grandma's, okay? Grandma's expecting you for dinner, so get a haircut. And by all means, stop at Carl's Jr. and pick up a big, juicy, charbroiled sirloin steak sandwich. Because if your grandma's like mine, her idea of meat is loaf. Nice and dry, because it's been in the oven since the Truman administration. So, take your big, juicy steak sandwich to Nana's. And don't freak when steak sauce squirts all over. Come on, it's Grandma's house. Plastic slipcover central. Which means you don't have to worry about a drippy, messy Carl's Jr. steak sandwich. You have to worry about becoming permanently stuck to the couch. This is the How to Eat Meat Man from Carl's Jr. reminding you that if it doesn't get all over the place, it doesn't belong in your face.
Did you notice the kinesthetic terms? Starting with a new haircut, which includes the suggestion of little hairs clinging to the back of your neck. The juicy steak sandwich. The dry meatloaf. The sauce squirts all over you. Don't freak. Remember, kinesthetic means feelings, emotions also. Drippy, messy, stuck to the couch. Is that an accident? All those kinesthetic images? For all I know, it might have been. Maybe the person who wrote that commercial has never even consciously thought about this, and it's an accident. Maybe he's never even heard of Hebbian connections. I don't care, as long as he's able to do it. The Carl's Jr.'s commercials deliberately associate their product with a slogan that expresses a kinesthetic experience. If it doesn't get all over the place, it doesn't belong in your face. They're selling the association that their target demo makes to eating a good hamburger, big and juicy and messy. Their commercials are primarily kinesthetic, but they're also visual and auditory. This might surprise you, but as a consumer, I don't like the Carl's Jr. commercials. I think they're juvenile. But guess what? I'm not in their target demo, which is 17 to 24-year-old males. Descriptive kinesthetic language is more memorable than scientific language. For example, you could say regurgitate, or you could say throw up. If you're trying to make an impact, make it descriptive. NLP practitioners have learned that if they alter someone's perception of an experience, they can alter that person's reaction to it. If, for example, someone is haunted by a painful visual image, either something she saw or something she imagined, you can alter her reaction to her memory of that image by changing it. Not necessarily by changing the content of the image, but the representation of the image. For instance, the subject might be depressed whenever she remembers when someone she loved did something that she experienced as very hurtful, very painful. Being a highly visual person, when she recalls this experience, she pictures it in her mind's eye. Being human, she finds herself picturing this painful scene repeatedly. And when she pictures this painful scene, she experiences the hurt all over again. Some common NLP techniques for helping her change her reaction to the image include the following. change the size of the picture. When I used to work as an NLP practitioner with clients, I would ask, are you seeing it in color or in black and white? How big is the picture? Does it fill a movie screen, or is it the size of a photograph or a TV screen? Very often, the client would respond, it's like seeing it on a big movie screen and it's in color. Great. Now let's change that image and see what happens. Look at the scene on the movie screen, and now let's shrink it down to the size of a 9-inch black and white TV set. How does that feel now? Often the client would say, it doesn't hurt so much when I see it like that. If that didn't work, I might have her shrink it to the size of a postage stamp. Or if she usually saw it as an 8 by 10-inch photograph, I'd have her blow up the image until it was the size of a mountain. How does that feel now? If that didn't feel any better to her, I'd have her picture the other person as being only 3 feet tall. If it was a man, I might suggest that she change what he was wearing to a frilly dress, or have him standing barefoot in a bucket of manure. Sounds ridiculous, I know. But we always were able to find a way to change the visual image so that it was less painful for the client to recall. Once we found an image that was less painful whenever she recalled it, then we would work on establishing an association to that image rather than to the original one. A highly auditory person, on the other hand, might repeatedly relive that painful moment by hearing in her mind what that other person said. In that case, we would change the sound. I'd have her hear the voice as though the other person had just inhaled helium, so that he was talking in a high-pitched, squeaky voice. That particular technique almost always produced a very different emotional response by the client to that incident. How does this apply to advertising, especially broadcast advertising? The overall sound of your commercial, including voice, music, and sound effects, greatly influences the effectiveness of that message. Far too many producers simply take a piece of written copy and then look for a music bed to slap underneath it. Music should be used only if it somehow enhances the message. Here's a commercial that illustrates how much sound can affect the ultimate experience.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. It is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. During the battle, rebel spies managed to steal secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star. It's just not the same without the music of John Williams. The Metropolitan Winds present a tribute to the music of John Williams, the man who set the pace for some of the most exciting movies ever made. Star Wars, Jaws, E.T., and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Concerts July 4th at Bass Performance Hall and July 11th at the Meyerson Symphony Center. A tribute to the music of John Williams. Come hear the music that made the movies.
Remember, kinesthetic is a term that encompasses not only physical motion, but also emotions. So someone who reacts emotionally is reacting kinesthetically. Emotions serve as memory markers or flags. If you were above the age of 8 in 1963, do you know where you were when JFK was shot? How about where you were when you heard that Elvis died? Where were you when John Lennon died? Where were you when Kurt Cobain died? If you could remember where you were when you heard about at least one of those events, then it's a safe bet that the person in question had some emotional significance to you. I was alive during all 4 of those events, but I remember only the first 2, when JFK was shot and when I heard that Elvis had died. I never cared much for John Lennon, so the news of his murder wasn't as shocking to me as the news of Elvis's early death, and Kurt Cobain was nothing more than a name to me. In fact, I can tell you exactly when and where I created the first version of this seminar. I hadn't even thought of doing such a seminar. My father died when I was 20, and I woke up one night a few years ago after having a very emotional dream about seeing my father. And I went into the bathroom, turned on the light, pulled out a notepad, and 2.5 hours later, I had written the foundation of this entire seminar. I don't know why, because the dream had nothing to do with hypnosis, but that emotional dream unleashed all these thoughts. Emotional markers create and unleash strong associations. I wrote all of these notes upon awakening from a very emotional dream about my father. That dream, by the way, was preceded by what I call the radio dream. If you've ever worked on the air in radio, you probably know what I'm talking about. In the radio dream, you're in the studio when suddenly you realize you're not prepared for the next program element. In this dream, I had just hit the recorded weather intro when I realized I didn't have the slightest idea what the weather was supposed to be. A silly dream, but one that is accompanied by emotion. Emotional markers affect memory like this. Think of your memory as a continuous line, beginning at birth and concluding at death. Obviously, you cannot remember everything that ever happens along that journey. Imagine that you're driving at a steady speed along a straight, flat highway, and you see a sign on the side of the road that suddenly makes you want to take a detour. Next stop, Stuckey's. Last bathroom for the next 50 miles. Those markers get your attention during that long drive, and emotional moments become especially implanted in our memories because they make more of an impact than the far larger number of moments that don't affect us emotionally. We're going through our lives, minding our own business, the radio's on, somebody's talking, and then something triggers an emotional marker, and now we're right there with the person who's talking on the radio. Or we're flipping through a magazine, and a word or image suddenly leaps off the page because it triggers an emotional marker. Or it might be an image in a TV commercial, or the headline on a direct mail piece. The more you can use this in your advertising, the more powerful your message will be. Remember, emotions fall under the sensory classification of kinesthetic. They're feelings. There was an aspirin commercial in the 1960s. A young woman apparently has a headache, and she snaps at her mother, "Mother, please, I'd rather do it myself." That's doubly kinesthetic, the pain of a headache, and the irritation toward her mother. Before I play this next example, I'd like to talk to you about your body. Imagine you're standing in front of a full-length mirror, completely naked. What do you see? How do you feel about what you see? Now, let's hear the commercial.
Body Works. Get your body in shape at Body Works too. We're having a special sign up now. 1-year membership, 30% off. Body Works. Body Works. Until July 4th. It's our opening special. 30% off 1-year membership. Body Works 2 new facilities will have 2 new tanning beds and racquetball. Body Works. Body Works. Aerobics and martial art classes. Sign up now. Body Works. Also offering a nursery and babysitting while you sweat. Sign up for our opening special. It won't last forever.
That commercial should have been very personal. After all, it's your body they're talking about. What can be more personal to you than your body? When I asked you to picture yourself naked, I commanded your full attention. This spot, however, talks about the sponsor, not the listener, not the consumer, without establishing any emotional connection. How hard should it be to make a Hawaiian vacation sound appealing? Gosh, you sure don't have much to work with, do you? Golden beaches, crystal clear waters, balmy tropical breezes, the sound of the surf outside your window, just relaxing, lying in the sun, swimming, snorkeling, windsurfing. Well, it shouldn't be very hard. I'd like to play for you a disc jockey ad-libbing about his family's trip to Hawaii. Notice how easily he invites you into the picture as you envision his year-old son's excitement.
What a ball we had Saturday, the first morning off, really, for me. Took Max for a walk, and we went just down the ocean walk there. He, it's so much fun. We had reservations about a year-old child in Hawaii. But there is so much to see and do for everybody. He got off on all the animals, the little ducks and the geese and the koi, because there's so many different, every hotel has the ponds and the waterfalls and stuff. He just was loving it. Now, I don't know, we got to fill the bathtub with more fish for him to become more comfortable back here. But, boy, it worked out. And, you know, if it's good for a year-old kid, you know it just gets better year after year after year. It was a lovely place. We had a great time.
Now, believe it or not, I think that is a good radio commercial, except, unfortunately, it isn't. It's just a disc jockey talking. Here is the paid commercial that played on that radio station on that day.
Warm rays, refreshing water, and gentle breezes welcome you to the Maui Intercontinental Resort. You'll love the tropical setting in renowned Wailea. Enjoy crescent-shaped beaches and 22 lush oceanfront acres. You'll be inspired by magnificent views of paradise. Awake to the challenge of championship golf and tennis. Discover a variety of dining experiences and friendly Hawaiian service. In celebration of Maui Intercontinental Resort's recently completed $40 million renovation, the hotel's room and car package is just $99.50 per person per night, based on double occupancy featuring a mountain view room and a budget rent-a-car. Or select the Golf Paradise package, including 3 nights golf and a budget rent-a-car for only $530 per person, based on double occupancy. To take advantage of these special offers, call your travel agent or toll-free 1-800-367-2960. 1-800-367-2960. Also ask about honeymoon and family plan packages. The Maui Intercontinental Resort in Wailea, Maui's favorite son.
Now, which motivated you to imagine taking a trip to Hawaii? The disc jockey talking to you in real language about his little boy being fascinated with the birds and fish, or the commercial announcer talking about their crescent-shaped beaches and 22 lush oceanfront acres and their variety of dining experiences? I'm guessing it was the disc jockey talking and sharing with you his little boy's delight, a gently emotional message, contrasted with a cold, hard, factual, boring commercial that followed it. Here is a very different type of commercial, created by Chuck Bloor, that uses a different emotion.
The voices you are about to hear were found in the Texas Panhandle.
A, B, C, E, F, G.
Jonas?
Now my A, B, C's.
Jonas, why don't you put something on there so your mommy can hear it?
Okay, Daddy.
Say, Mommy, I love you.
Mommy, I love you.
This is Jonas speaking.
This is Jonas.
Can you say speaking?
Speaking. This is Daddy. Watch out, Daddy!
The tape recording you just heard is all that's left of that little boy and his daddy. The only thing he knew about traffic safety, his daddy taught him by accident. Observe Texas traffic safety regulations. Be careful, damn it, be careful. Traffic safety doesn't happen by accident.
It's quite possible that you didn't enjoy that commercial. Whenever I play that spot during a seminar, the audience always is very quiet afterward. Once I played it, and after what seemed to be an eternity of silence, someone said quietly, "That's disturbing." And you know what? I think the fact that children die on our highways every day due to the carelessness of their parents is disturbing. Did you enjoy that commercial? Probably not. But do you think the message would have been as strong if it had consisted of an announcer reporting the latest traffic accident statistics as compiled by the government? How would you like to pull into a service station, fill your tank with gas, and drive off without paying anything at all? You'd probably be delighted, perhaps excited, maybe even thrilled. But you would react emotionally to such an opportunity. Hey, who wouldn't? That's what this next spot is all about. But that's not what they sell. Instead, the focus is on when the promotion will occur, not on the advantages or the emotional excitement the promotion offers to the listener.
It could be today.
Possibly tomorrow.
It will happen soon. Soon, Cajun 103 will fill your gas tank free. Win free gas from Cajun 103.
With a Cajun 103 bumper sticker.
It could be tomorrow. The place, Kenny Wentz, Texaco, corner of Lee and Highland. Soon, Cajun 103 will give you your share of $1,003 in free gas.
Keep listening to find out when.
The only way to win is to have a Cajun 103 bumper sticker on your car. Pick yours up now.
Then keep listening to find out when we'll fill up your tank with free gas.
It could be any time.
It will be soon.
From Cajun 103.
Was there any emotion in that spot? Did it command your interest? Probably not. Here's a commercial that truly identifies the emotional angle, focusing not on the advertiser, but instead on the potential client.
They tell you at the academy to get it over with right away. Get the burden off as soon as you can. So they've got this procedure. First, you say, this is Officer Vance, is this Mr. or Mrs. Lewis, say that's their name. And then you just go ahead and tell them that their son or daughter has been killed in an accident. And then you say you're sorry. You'd be amazed how many people say exactly the same thing, that they knew this was going to happen, that they knew he was drinking, and why didn't they do something about it before now? And that's always a tough question for me, because I don't know why they didn't do something about it either.
Charter Peachford Hospital offers an alcohol and drug treatment program for teenagers. Call Charter Peachford at 454-2305. Because if your teenager is out there risking his life, there is something you can do to make him stop. If you don't get help at Charter Peachford, get help somewhere.
The emotion they chose was fear. Was that the only possible emotion they could have chosen? No, they could have chosen joy, the joyfulness of having the child free of his drug problem, or anger, the anger that the teenager feels toward her parents and teachers who keep nagging at her, or frustration. But they chose an emotion, and they used that emotion to communicate the sales message. What emotions might you use to sell a cable sports network? There's a TV sports channel in North America called ESPN, and a number of years ago they launched ESPN2. What emotion would you choose to sell a new sports channel? The thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, reliving thrilling moments of sports history? Well, here's what they chose.
Okay, people, next up a poem from the lovely Jenny.
This is a poem about, My love is lost, and that hurts most. What's left is only burnt toast. I melt, I turn to slush, like a toilet unable to flush. I pour my heart out, he is but a wall. Watching NCAA hoops, 180 games in all. If it were a woman, there'd be something I could do, but it's the devil's network, one called ESPN2. A little affection, all I seek, but NHL hockey 3 nights a week. IndyCar, NASCAR, college football too. We never do the things we used to do. There's even a wrap-up show called RPM Tonight, it's not enough to watch the races. He's got to watch stupid highlights, and then it's, oh, Jenny, could you move a little? You're in the way. God, I could kill him, and to think this is the man I was going to procreate with? Thank you.
ESPN2. Some will love it, others not so much.
That commercial, produced by Goldsmith Jeffrey, used anger and resentment to sell a sports channel. Could they have chosen a different emotion? Yes. But before you begin writing, decide what one emotion will drive the entire commercial or campaign. Every campaign you do, whether it's a commercial campaign or a simple promo or a liner, should be emotionally based. And you should know what that emotion is before you write it, not afterward. You know what I like most about Christmas? Giving and receiving presents. You know what I like least? Wrapping presents. I never have enough wrapping paper, and when I do, I run out of Scotch tape before I've finished, and if I live to be 100, I'll never learn to tie a ribbon around a box and into a bow. You're probably better at gift wrapping than I am, but even so, you probably were able to relate to what I just said. That's the type of personal angle, of emotional angle, that should have been utilized in the following commercial.
This Christmas poem is brought to you by the nice people at Crate and Freight of Lewisburg, your one-stop packing, shipping, and mailing centers. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all across the room, the packages were flying as Santa's approach was soon. The packages were piled by the chimney with abandon, in hopes of delaying St. Nicholas's landing. With Ma in a tither and I in despair, 'cause we had just found out the Scotch tape wasn't there. The ribbons and wrapping had run out long ago, and since replaced by newspaper, not very chic, you know. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, it was neighbor George and quite full of chatter. Scotch tape, wrapping paper, I've had it to there. I'm off to Crate and Freight, they'll wrap it with care. As he pulled from the driveway, I heard him expound, Crate and Freight has the paper and they'll wrap it around. Quick as a flash, we gathered our mess, and where to, you say? Well, there's only one guess. And now as we sit by the fireplace with glee, thank you, Crate and Freight, you've made Christmas for me. Crate and Freight at 548 North 3rd Drive in Lewisburg.
People have lots of emotional associations to Christmas gift giving. Did that commercial touch on any of yours? This next one, however, is an extraordinary commercial.
My name is James Walter Smith. I'm currently serving a life sentence with no chance of parole at the state penitentiary. I'm 23 years old. If you would have met me a month ago, I probably would have shot you just for the money in your wallet. If you would have met me 2 years ago, I might have raped your wife, your sister, or your daughter. If you would have met me 7 years ago, I would have beaten you with a baseball bat just for wearing the wrong colors. If you would have met me 12 years ago,
I might have robbed your son or daughter for the change in their pockets. But if you would have met me when I was
5, maybe you could have made a difference in my life.
90% of prison inmates have been abused as children. Through early intervention and treatment, Childhaven can reduce the chances of an abused child from becoming a violent offender from 47% to just 3%. To help, give us a call or visit childhaven.org, because helping a child helps us all.
That is using emotion, appropriately and powerfully. One small thing that would have made it even better. It would have been more effective if they had delayed the start of the music. Instead of starting the music when the announcer's voice came in, they could have delayed it until she said, "to help." The announcer's first words were a recitation of statistics. But the emotional impact of this message does not lie in the statistics. It lies in the fact that you can help that young boy avoid a path that will lead to a life in prison. Remember, though, that I am making only that one small criticism of an otherwise excellent commercial. Just as an experiment, let's listen to that spot once more. Notice where the music begins, and see if you can imagine the increased impact of the music if the music did not begin until the announcer said, "to help."
My name is James Walter Smith. I'm currently serving a life sentence with no chance of parole at the state penitentiary. I'm 23 years old. If you would have met me a month ago, I probably would have shot you just for the money in your wallet. If you would have met me 2 years ago, I might have raped your wife, your sister, or your daughter. If you would have met me 7 years ago, I would have beaten you with a baseball bat just for wearing the wrong colors. If you would have met me 12 years ago,
I might have robbed your son or daughter for the change in their pockets. But if you would have met me when I was
5, maybe you could have made a difference in my life.
90% of prison inmates have been abused as children. Through early intervention and treatment, Childhaven can reduce the chances of an abused child from becoming a violent offender from 47% to just 3%. To help, give us a call or visit childhaven.org, because helping a child helps us all.
Here's a commercial that utilizes the technique of involvement, which we'll come to later, and it uses emotion, but not as effectively as the commercial you just heard.
What is it about us women? What is it about us that makes us feel guilty when we vacuum around furniture instead of under it? What is it about women that makes us never take the last piece of anything from a plate? What is it that makes us lick Kleenex and scrub kids' faces with it? Even kids that aren't our own. What makes us do that? What is it that makes us 50% better than men at locating misplaced socks? What is it that makes us buy canned goods and put them in our cupboards and then never use them? Is that heredity or environment that makes us do that? I'd like to know. And what is it that makes us smoke cigarettes even more than men? I'd like to know that too. And what is it that makes cigarette companies spend millions of dollars in advertising each year to get us to keep smoking? Could it be the millions in profits they make? What is it about that fact that makes you so mad? And now that you know, what is it you're going to do to quit?
That commercial immediately sucks you in and then makes a smooth segue to the core message. But it doesn't seem terribly effective, does it? That's because the emotion didn't appear until the very end of the commercial. You don't use a commercial to lead people to an emotion. You use an emotion to lead the targeted consumer to a specific sales message. Are you familiar with fire ants? In some parts of the country, they're also known as red ants. Fire ants are large, bright, red, bulbous ants that are very aggressive. They bite, and when they bite, it hurts. Knowing that, what emotion would you choose to sell a product that promises to get rid of fire ants?
Fire ants do not make honey. They don't have pretty wings, they don't bring you luck, they just bite you repeatedly, leaving painful, stinging welts. You cannot change a fire ant, no matter how much counseling you give him. Show me a man who stoops to help a fire ant, and I'll show you a guy with welts on his butt. No, fire ants must die, and they must die quickly. Before you've got so many mounds in your backyard, you need a lunar module to get to the barbecue. You don't want baits, since those can take more than a week. And you don't want to lug a big sack of chemicals and a hose around the yard. No, what you want is Ant-Stop Orthene Fire Ant Killer from Ortho. You put 2 teaspoons of Ant-Stop around the mound, and you're done. It's that fast. You don't even water it in. The scout ants come out. They track it back into the mound, and here's the really good part. Everybody dies, including the Queen. The Queen is dead. Vive la Révolution! That's French, you know. Ant-Stop Orthene Fire Ant Killer from Ortho. Kick fire ant butt. For best results, always follow label instructions.
The emotion used in that commercial, which was created by Radio Savant, was hatred, which is what a lot of people who have encountered fire ants up close and personal feel toward them. Here's another commercial from the same campaign.
Fire ants are not lovable. People do not want fire ant plush toys. They aren't cuddly, they don't do little tricks, they just bite you and leave red stinging welts that make you want to cry. That's why they have to die, and they have to die right now. You don't want them to have a long lingering illness, you want death. A quick, excruciating, see you in hell kind of death. You don't want to lug a bag of chemicals and a garden hose around the yard. It takes too long. And baits can take up to a week. No, my friend, what you want is Ant-Stop Orthene Fire Ant Killer from Ortho. You put 2 teaspoons of Ant-Stop around the mound, and you're done. You don't even water it in. The scout ants bring it back into the mound, and this is the really good part. Everybody dies. Even the Queen. It's that fast. And that's good, because killing fire ants shouldn't be a full-time job, even if it is pretty fun. Ant-Stop Orthene Fire Ant Killer from Ortho. Kick fire ant butt. For best results, always follow label instructions.
Now, that spot wasn't quite as effective as the first because the emotion, hatred, wasn't presented as strongly. On the other hand, the commercial did an excellent job of demonstrating how easy it is to use the product. Remember, there are many kinds of emotion, and there are many ways to use those many kinds. A good advertiser, that is, a good communicator, is not afraid to use honest, open emotions, as in this commercial from Roger Wilco Productions.
Nice evening, Carol.
Lovely, thanks. Paul and I just watched a video.
Look at the state of you! Look, sort yourself out! You make me sick!
Was it a good film?
Oh, brilliant. It was one of those real weepies.
Look, stop crying! You're always crying! You stupid bitch!
Just a quiet night in, really. Don't pretend anymore. Call the Domestic Violence Advice Line on 01843 299 699, 01843 299 699. All calls will be confidential.
Again, note how they relied not on statistics, but on real, recognizable emotion to deliver their message. In Des Moines, Iowa, the local cable television company removed MTV from its basic cable offerings. This was very unusual because MTV always is featured as part of the basic cable package in the United States. MTV launched a radio campaign designed to get cable subscribers in Des Moines to call their cable TV company and demand that they reinstate MTV. So, what emotion did they use to motivate people to act on that message? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll? No.
The following places have MTV.
Argentina, Austria, Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Belgium, Belarus, Bolivia, Brazil, Ecuador, El Salvador.
The following places don't have MTV.
Des Moines.
The following places have MTV.
Czech Republic, Chile, Liechtenstein, Denmark, Egypt, Hong Kong, Iceland, India, Ecuador, Netherlands, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua.
The following places don't have MTV.
Des Moines.
The following places have MTV.
Estonia, Panama, Mexico, Germany, Paraguay, Peru, Hungary, Portugal, Latvia, Spain, Uruguay, Venezuela, Bulgaria, Croatia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Poland, Indonesia, Romania, Ireland, Israel.
The following places don't have MTV.
Des Moines.
Get the picture? Well, actually you don't, and that's the whole point. To get MTV back, call TCI at 515-246-1890 and say,
I want my MTV!
Then call the hotline at 1-800-595-0099 to join the cause.
Did they use rock and roll and the excitement of the music and youth and vitality and sex to sell MTV? No. They used resentment. Hey, all those other countries have MTV. MTV was invented in America, and we don't have it right here in America's heartland. And yes, if you go to Des Moines, Iowa today and turn on the local cable TV, you'll find MTV is back on the air. Here's a commercial created by Kimberly O'Hagan.
Well, this is just one of the many weeks that I go and visit my family. I always make a point of going and catch up with Mum, tell her about my week, tell her what I've been doing, and I share a joke with Dad. He's always loved my jokes, even though they're pretty corny. And I always go along and say hi to my sisters. They're always together. Today I bought these beautiful daisies for my younger sister. I know that she really appreciates it. So I always give them those. And my mates are always hassling me, why do you go and see your family so much? They only probably see theirs about once a month. I guess it's because I do feel responsible for them. And I do feel guilty. And I guess it's because I killed them. If I wasn't speeding, they'd still be alive. I miss my family. This graveyard is such a sad home.
The faster you go, the bigger the mess.
I'd say that qualifies as an emotionally based spot. Here's a campaign that used an interesting emotion to sell, well, you'll see.
The woman who's leaving me wants to know what I've got to say about it. So I say, well, I guess there's a road, and you want to walk it. And it's probably a long and hard road. So if I were you and I had a long, hard road ahead of me, I'd get a pair of IE shoes with Nike Tensile Air to wear on the road, because you're going to need the cushioning of Tensile Air soles to protect your feet from the constant pounding of the cold, cruel earth. She laughed at the speech. I don't think she thought it was funny, but it seemed a lot better than grabbing her ankles and saying, "Baby, please don't leave me. Oh, God, please." Which is what I was thinking. I.e. casual shoes with Nike Tensile Air. From the ankles down, at least, life is solved.
Frankly, although that's a very entertaining commercial, I'm not sure how closely that emotion fits that product. But if the intent of the campaign is to introduce that special style of Nike shoe, and if they run that type of commercial enough, they will succeed in delivering the message that Nike Tensile Air sole shoes protect your feet from the constant pounding of the cold, cruel earth. I'd like to share with you two more examples to illustrate just how powerfully a message can be delivered when you use emotion appropriately. These two commercials have something in common. They each are trying to motivate individuals to act, to do something, to help others. Here's the first.
Schnoz, sniffer, ski jump. There are a lot of funny names for noses, but there's nothing funny about not having a nose. Whether it's because they get their noses too close to the lion cage at the zoo, or they have an unfortunate encounter with the elevator, dozens of San Diegans lose their noses each month. This is Nigel Benjamin with the San Diego Nose Bank, and we desperately need donations. San Diego, it's time to give someone less fortunate a chance to smell the roses. Have the sense to share one of your senses.
Of all the things you could be asked to donate, asking for a blood donation isn't asking for much. Yet considering only 5% of San Diegans donate blood, you'd think we were asking for an arm or a leg. With 5 donor centers and 6 blood mobiles across San Diego County, donating blood is an easy way to save lives. Call the San Diego Blood Bank at 619-296-6393 for the donation center nearest you.
Now, be honest. Did that spot make you want to donate blood to the San Diego Blood Bank? Probably not. Contrast that kind of meaningless, mocking approach that is devoid of any real emotion with this production by Jim Garacci.
Fred, just tell us about Greg.
Greg was a pretty normal teenage boy. Loved music, was kind of a punk rocker himself, played bass and guitar, and loved working. He worked at a bunch of different jobs and did telemarketing and bag groceries and things like that. Just kind of a energetic teenage kid when he was diagnosed with cancer at age 14. They diagnosed that he had what's called chondrosarcoma, which is a relatively rare form of cancer, and it was a tumor on his shoulder, or on the cartilage of his shoulder, and it had actually grown so quickly that it broke his shoulder blade, and that started his a little over 3-year struggle with cancer.
Down on my knees again tonight. I'm hoping this prayer will turn out right. See, there is a boy that needs your help. I've done all that I can do myself.
What were your thoughts when you found out?
When he was diagnosed, I mean, there is this sense of, oh, how could it be us this time? I say I learned a lot from Greg during the period of him fighting cancer, and one of the things I learned is he never said, "Why me?"
Was there a point where you knew that you were going to lose him?
I think the last couple months of his life, we had to look his death in the face. And it's such a hard thing to do with a 17-year-old boy. The thought of thousands of kids going through this is almost too much to bear sometimes. And I know one of the things that has me working with Children's Cancer Research Fund is I've seen that the dollars they can raise applied to research can make big differences in survival rates for very specific types of cancer. And that means hundreds of kids that live through this and thousands of family members that won't have to say goodbye to a kid the way we did.
Let him grow old, live life without this fear. What would I be living without him here? He's so tired and he's scared. Let him know that you're there.
How you doing with it now?
Well, it's been about a year and a half since Greg died. It doesn't go away.
You said there was a couple of months before Greg left that you knew what was going to happen.
With cancer, every time it recurs, your odds get worse and worse. And he was on about his 5th. On one level, I think that I like to think that he knew it was time to go, to let go. And I just think that strong-willed kid said, okay, it's time to take this to the next phase.
Can you hear me? Am I getting through tonight? Can you see him? Can you make him feel alright? See, he's not just anyone, he's my son.
He died during surgery, and we'd been with him right up to that. And saw him right after, and that's an image that you'll never lose, that you'll never be able to forget. But I really try to focus on Greg
living, having fun, and things like that. And I think that's where we have to focus, celebrating his life and doing whatever we can to avoid one more kid having to go through this. I think that's where we have to focus, doing whatever we can to avoid one more kid having to go through this.
I deliberately saved that piece for the end of this section because there's a very good chance that you were affected by it emotionally. The first time I heard it was over my car radio as I was driving down the street, and I cried. So I'll understand if you decide to hit the pause button for a few moments before we move on to a detailed and, I hope, exceptionally interesting exploration of hypnotic techniques and how you can apply them to your advertising. Hypnotic techniques. What is hypnosis? Let's start with a definition of hypnosis. Hypnosis is a state of highly focused concentration to the exclusion of most or even virtually all other outside stimuli. I guarantee you have been hypnotized at one time or another. Have you ever had the experience of driving down the road, lost in thought, and suddenly found yourself wondering if you had stopped at the past few traffic lights? You were consciously focused on something, a thought, a visual image, a sound, a feeling, to the exclusion of all other external stimuli. You were hypnotized. Your conscious attention was so narrowly focused on what thoughts preoccupied you that you were oblivious to your outside surroundings. At least your conscious mind was oblivious to the outside world. Your subconscious mind continued to attend to the outside cues that prevent you from running red lights or mowing down pedestrians. If you've ever found yourself so immersed in a novel that suddenly you looked up and you were surprised to discover it had gotten dark and everyone else had left, you were hypnotized. You were in a state of highly focused concentration to the exclusion of all or almost all other external stimuli. Here are some of the tools that a hypnotherapist uses. Pacing and leading. Pacing and leading consists of mirroring the subject's experience so closely that your experience and his seem to be identical, so much so that if you modify your behavior slightly, the subject will likely modify his to match. For example, you're walking down the street with a friend and you exactly match his strides with yours. You fall into his rhythm. After a few minutes of matching his pace, if you speed up a little bit, the odds are that he will speed up a little bit too. The first time I was exposed to this was when I attended my first NLP seminar many years ago. The seminar leaders explained the concept of pacing and leading, and then we broke for lunch. And before the break, they told us, we want you to go to lunch and find a stranger to pace and then lead them. In other words, first do what they're doing physically, and then get them to follow your lead. And I simply did not believe this would work. It sounded like something that maybe is cute in a book, but it wouldn't work in real life. So I went to a fast food place for lunch. I was standing in line, waiting to order, and ahead of me was a heavyset businessman. And I decided to try this technique. It was an assignment I had been given. I knew it wouldn't work, but okay, I'll try it. So I stood off to his side and a little bit behind him in his periphery vision, which meant he could see me, but he wasn't consciously looking at me. He had his arms folded, so I folded my arms too. I just stood there for about a minute. And then I said to myself, well, here goes nothing. And slowly I unfolded my arms and let them drop to my side. And guess what he did? He unfolded his arms and let them drop to his side. I couldn't believe it. Pacing and leading means first matching their actions, doing what they do, and then extending or altering those actions. In a couple of minutes, I'll show you how to do this in your advertising. A hypnotherapist paces and leads mostly with words. The hypnotherapist might say, as you sit there in your chair, hearing my voice, listening to my word. Now, if you're the hypnotherapist, at this point, you're pacing everything the subject is doing. You can see he's sitting there. You can assume he's hearing your voice. And you continue, breathing easily, occasionally blinking your eyes. All of this actually is happening. And then the therapist moves from pacing to leading. Soon you might notice how relaxed, how very comfortable you are becoming. And the subject's subconscious mind thinks, well, he got the first part right. I was doing all those other things he said I was doing. Yeah, I guess I do notice I'm getting more relaxed. The hypnotherapist paces with immediately observable behavior. If the hypnotherapist notices the subject is blinking more rapidly, he says it. As you sit there, noticing that you're blinking more rapidly. But when the hypnotherapist says that, the person thinks the therapist caused it. And when the therapist notices the subject's breathing is slowing down and his body has sunk deeper into the chair, the therapist adds, and as you notice that your breathing is becoming much slower and your body is sinking deeper into your chair, and then the hypnotherapist paces with behaviors that from previous experience he reasonably can expect the current subject to be having. The therapist might say, as you sit there in your chair, hearing my voice, wondering what is going to happen next. How did he know? He must be reading my mind. Well, we can pretty much guess from past experience that this is what the subject is thinking. This is an example of mind reading, which we will get to shortly. And then the therapist moves from pacing to leading, to suggesting a change in the subject's experience. Soon you might notice how relaxed, how very comfortable you are becoming. In advertising, you pace and lead with common human experience. A comedian named Rich Hall had this thing called sniglets, which he defined as words that don't exist but should. I never thought this was a terribly funny feature, but I do remember one example. He said, you know when you get a magazine in the mail, and you open it up and all those little cards fall out of the magazine and into your lap? Those are called lap flaps. That was in the late 1980s, but to this day, every time I open a magazine and a card falls out, I think lap flaps. That's an example of pacing and leading. The pacing was describing an experience that was familiar to me. The leading was giving it a name. Here's a commercial that paces and leads.
Over here, the museum features a typewriter, a communication tool that became obsolete with the invention of the personal computer.
Where's the monitor?
Where's the mouse? In this exhibit, we see a telephone answering machine.
Imagine that.
It became obsolete when U.S. West introduced voice messaging.
You mean people have these contraptions in their homes?
Indeed. As you well know, voice messaging takes messages while you're on the phone or online. Answering machines never could.
I'll bet people back then missed a lot of important calls.
Indeed.
It looks complicated.
Oh, it was. See, with voice messaging, there's nothing to turn on or off. No tapes to jam or replace. Yes, with voice messaging, we've come a long way since 1998.
Yeah, and that was just last year.
Order now and get free activation plus your first month of service free. Just call U.S. West at 1-800-982-3525. That's 1-800-982-3525. Voice messaging from U.S. West. Life's better here.
That's an example of advertising via metaphor, which we'll talk about shortly, but it's also an example of pacing and leading. We used to use the typewriter, but it was replaced with a word processor. We used to use an answering machine, but now it's been replaced with voicemail. When I teach my How to Create Radio Commercials That Sell seminar, I talk about the importance of showing instead of telling. In this case, unfortunately, they told instead of showed. They didn't need the museum guide to say, yes, and that was just last year. The audience could have figured that part out for themselves. But they did a very good job, I thought, of pacing and leading. Also, most people who try to create commercials with humorous stories make the big mistake of devoting the entire commercial to this funny little story without doing anything to sell. In that commercial, they devoted the first 15 seconds to the museum and the remaining 45 seconds to what they were selling. And that's a good ratio to follow. Introduce the premise, then move on to the selling part of the commercial. This commercial by Dick Terhune paces some of the milder fantasies of many men, and then leads the targeted consumer to the way to realize those fantasies. In this case, the targeted consumer is not men, it's wives who are looking for the perfect gift for their husbands.
Just because we mow the lawn, usually, without being asked, and don't grumble about carrying the garbage to the curb, it doesn't mean that we don't hear that primal voice. The one that screams, I am still 21, hanging with my fraternity brothers, shooting pool and chugging brewskis, and by God, one day I will have my own rec room exactly like this. Even if the only Greek pledge he ever made was no souvlaki for me, he still hears that voice. One day, it must be answered. Christmas is a good day. Hanukkah, 8 good days. Columbus Day, trust me, we're not at all picky about this one. Patio.com is where you find the pool table of our dreams. Buy it now. Patio.com will deliver it when you're ready. You can visit a Patio.com store in Westport, Stamford, Greenwich, New Canaan, or Ridgefield, Connecticut, also Mount Kisco, Scarsdale, and Manhattan, or from wherever you click your mouse, Patio.com. Sure, we're the planet's largest patio furniture store, but we're also here to make a dream come true.
Now, here's a commercial that attempts to pace and lead.
You know, when one of my kids gets sick, the last thing I want is a doctor I don't know who doesn't know my son. And I have to tell you, I feel the same way about my car.
When it comes to your Ford car or truck, take it to the people who know best. Take it home to your Ford dealer.
In that case, the pacing and leading don't fit together. She feels about her children the way she feels about her car. If you're a parent, you probably were with her at the beginning of that commercial. But then she tried to lead you from child to car. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. And now here's a commercial that actually does the opposite of pacing and leading.
You know, dear, this is probably the last time we'll hear our baby Chasbo make that awful crying sound.
Oh, I do hope you're right.
Of course I'm right. When baby Chasbo turns 16, he'll have access to the trust fund. Then he'll inherit the family businesses, the oil field, the vineyard in Frisco. Why, he'll never have to work an honest day in his life.
Yeah, right. We all have to work for a living. You should be working for a company that offers you a great salary with excellent benefits. You should be working for Mass Crane and Hoist. Right now, they're offering top pay for crane technicians, plus health, 401k, disability, educational assistance, and much more. Call Mass Crane and Hoist today. 1-800-909-2299. Mass Crane and Hoist has many other positions to fill. They provide the training, so all you need is a driver's license and some experience with motors and controls. Hey, we've all got to work for a living. It's time you worked for top pay and excellent benefits. It's time you called Mass Crane and Hoist. 1-800-909-2299. 1-800-909-2299.
Instead of pacing the targeted consumer's common experience and then leading them to the desired sales result, they begin by pacing an experience that absolutely is outside the experience of their target audience. So they begin the spot by losing the very people whose attention they're trying to attract. Here is a very sophisticated example of pacing and leading, and also using emotion.
In second grade, Sarah taught Katie how to double jump rope. In 8th grade, Katie held Sarah's hand when she got her ears pierced down at the local mall.
Ow! You're not gonna faint, are you?
At Sarah's 16th birthday party, Katie won the limbo contest.
Go, Katie! Go, Katie!
And senior year, they got accepted to the same college, the one they'd both been hoping for. Today, they finished midterms and decided to hit the town to celebrate. And later tonight, one of them is going to die. And the other one, the one behind the wheel, will have to live with it for the rest of her life. Drinking drivers kill friends, and that's a price no one wants to pay. So be a real pal and drive sober. It's the way to go. A message from the Oregon Department of Transportation.
That spot paces you through the lives of Sarah and Katie, and then leads you to a very logical and very tragic conclusion, along with a solution of how you could avoid such a tragedy. Here's another example of pacing and leading.
Honey,
Uh-huh.
do I look fat in this dress?
No, you look fine.
Oh, just fine. So you think I should lose 5 pounds?
If you want to.
Great, because I'm fat.
Look, you're not going to get me to say that you're fat.
Well, you don't have to. You think I am.
I'm not saying anything.
Maybe I should wear the black dress.
Just do what you want.
These are your friends. I mean, don't you care what I wear?
Honey, you look fine.
Fine?
Look, all your stuff is nice. Wear what you want.
Should I wear the blue dress?
Yeah, I like that one.
I don't have a blue dress.
If the preceding signs were extremely familiar to you, you're married. Lowe's Coronado Bay Resort on Coronado Island, 1-800-81-LOEWS. You need it. You both need it.
That campaign, created by Claudia Kaplan, paces the experiences of many married couples and then leads them to a solution. Here's one more spot from that campaign.
What's up, hon?
Nothing.
Nothing what? What?
Why can't we just do something romantic for a change?
Well, that's fine. We'll call, make reservations somewhere. We'll go out. It'll be romantic. What?
No, if I call, it isn't romantic.
Well, does the dog gonna... Well, I'll call. What do you want to do?
No, forget it.
All right, I'll call. What's the big deal? What's the problem?
There's no problem, no big deal, okay?
But you're upset about something, and I don't even know...
No, I'm not. I'm fine.
You're fine. Mm-hmm. No, yeah, we're fine again.
If the preceding signs were extremely familiar to you, you're married. Lowe's Coronado Bay Resort on Coronado Island, 1-800-81-LOEWS. You need it. You both need it.
That's pacing and leading. They start with a conversation that is familiar to many married couples. But think about all the commercials you hear that present conversations that are nothing like any you've ever had. Those conversations don't pace your own experience. And if the commercial doesn't pace your experience, it cannot lead you to the conclusion it is trying to move you toward. Mind reading is a pacing device. You cannot really read someone's mind, not even if that person is hypnotized. But in hypnosis, mind reading consists of acting as though you know what the subject is thinking, even though you have no objective way of obtaining that information. So the hypnotherapist might say, as you sit there in your chair, hearing my voice, wondering what is going to happen next. In that case, the hypnotherapist begins by pacing with an experience the subject is having that is objectively verifiable. The therapist can see that the subject is sitting there, and under normal circumstances, the therapist can safely assume that the subject hears the hypnotherapist's voice. But how can the hypnotherapist know that the subject is wondering what's going to happen next? Well, the therapist doesn't really know. But if the subject has never been hypnotized before, it's pretty safe to assume that's exactly what she is doing, wondering what is going to happen next. And when the subject experiences the hypnotherapist as somehow being able to read her thoughts, she is much more likely to respond to other suggestions that therapist might make. Here's how you mind read in a commercial. A few examples. You've always wondered what it would be like to jump out of an airplane. Have you ever wondered that? If so, then I just read your mind. You know you should be eating a more healthy, balanced diet, but how do I know you know? Because it's a very common human experience. You've heard about the new techniques for laser eye surgery. You'd love to have perfect vision without eyeglasses or contact lenses, but you're not sure how safe the procedure is. Does that apply to you? Well, it certainly does to me. This is mind reading, And it's a very powerful advertising technique. If you can predict the common human experience that relates to and maybe the objections your target audience has to what you're selling, say it. You don't have to say, "A lot of people have told me." Just say it. "We know that you'd like to do this if only." That is the mind-reading experience. Here's the beginning of a commercial that utilizes both mind-reading and pacing and leading.
Have you ever wanted a white goose-down comforter? You know you'd love the look and feel of Nature's Best Insulator, but a couple of things always get in the way: knowing how to buy a comforter and the price.
That's an example of pacing and leading and mind-reading. It begins by asking if you've ever wanted a white goose-down comforter, and then it paces your reasons for not having purchased one yet. You know you'd love the look and feel of Nature's Best Insulator, but a couple of things always get in the way: knowing how to buy a comforter and the price. How do they know that you'd love the look and feel of Nature's Best Insulator? How do they know that a couple of things always get in the way? How do they know that the two things that always get in the way are knowing how to buy a comforter and the price? Well, if you have ever wanted a white goose-down comforter, then those probably are the thoughts that have gone through your mind. That commercial read your mind, paced your experiences, and then led you to the solution to your problem. Presupposition is making a statement that implicitly presumes the other person is about to have a particular experience. The hypnotherapist might say, "As you notice that your arm is feeling heavier and heavier," well, the hypnotherapist is presuming that your arm is feeling heavier and that you will notice that. As you think back to the very first time you encountered this problem, you might be surprised by what you remember. Again, that contains two presuppositions. One is that the person will think back, and the other is that the person will remember something. I might say to you, "So when you try to explain some of the key elements of this seminar to your boss, I'm presupposing that you will try to explain some of this to your boss." Or I might say, "When you find yourself back in the daily grind, wondering if there really is any way to use any of these hypnotic advertising techniques, don't try to use all of them at once." That's actually a pretty good example of both a presupposition and of pacing and leading. I am presupposing that you're going to go home and try to figure out how to use these. And then I lead you to the next statement. Don't try to use all of these at once. Pick just one and try it out. In a commercial or advertisement, you might say, "When you finally decide to upgrade your computer," you're not asking if the person might ever upgrade her computer. You're assuming that one day she will decide to do just that. As you drive home from work today, wondering why once again you didn't accomplish as much as you had hoped, how many presuppositions did I just make, by the way? 4. Here's one. As you drive home from work. Next. Wondering. Next. You didn't accomplish as much. Next. As you had hoped. 4 presuppositions in that one partial sentence. Presupposition is powerful in an advertising message because you establish rapport right away if what you are presupposing is accurate. Here's a commercial that begins with a presupposition.
Okay, so you've been living in the same place for a while. The walls are starting to close in. Do you need a shrink? Possibly. But the problem may not be in your head. It's your stuff. You know, the treadmill, the old computer you got last Christmas, the closet stuffed with Beanie Babies, the clarinet you played in high school, and so well, the golf clubs you haven't used in 3 years. Okay, 4. All that stuff, it's just too good to give away, but nothing you really need anymore. So what are you going to do? You call a remodeler and build onto your house? That's kind of goofy because you know you're just going to fill it up with more stuff. It's your way. Be strong. Call the Oregonian Classifieds. One little ad, poof, there goes the piano. You didn't even know you had a piano, did you? Run an ad for 3 days, you reach 1 million potential buyers who live all around you. Your ad goes online, too, so if some guy in Chicago wants to buy your treadmill, tell him, hey, come and get it.
The Oregonian Classifieds. Call 221-8000.
Get rid of your stuff and get back your personal space. Then fill it up again.
221-8000. The Oregonian Classifieds.
The presupposition is you've been living in the same place for a while, and it's getting filled up with stuff. So it's actually two presuppositions. Now, you have no way of knowing the consumer is having that experience, but you are building the entire sales message on the supposition that the targeted consumer is having that experience.